The night before her wedding, Amelia Rhodes should have been resting in the luxury of her Chicago lakefront penthouse, dreaming of the perfect tomorrow. Instead, fate had something else planned. Her fiancé, Caleb Whitmore, was everything she thought she ever wanted: charismatic, wealthy, and heir to one of the most influential families in the Midwest. His mother, Victoria, had embraced Amelia like her own, filling the gap left by a childhood of loneliness. His sister, Zoe, had quickly become her confidant. Everything seemed perfectly in place, like a fairy tale, stitched in silk and gold. But that night, a forgotten pair of antique cufflinks, a family heirloom meant for the ceremony, led Amelia to the Grand Sterling Hotel, where Caleb's bachelor party was in full swing. The hotel staff, too familiar with her from previous charity galas hosted with Caleb, escorted her to the private suite without hesitation. What she overheard behind that door would rip apart the illusion she had built her life around. And instead of walking down the aisle toward a new beginning with the man she loved, Amelia would find herself marching toward a reckoning, one not just for Caleb, but for everyone who believed the mask he wore was real. Amelia hesitated outside the suite door of the Grand Sterling Hotel, the velvet box in her hand, suddenly feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds. She wasn't supposed to be here. The cufflinks, passed down from Caleb's grandfather, were a last-minute request from Victoria. Amelia had planned to drop them off, discreetly. No drama, no surprises. Just one more task before forever began. But fate has a wicked sense of timing. The door was slightly ajar, and through the gap she heard laughter. Caleb's laugh, deep and unmistakable. Then came the voice of Jason, his best friend since prep school. "Come on, man. You're really going through with this." Caleb chuckled. "Why not? Amelia looks great on paper. Her family's connections will open up new funding streams, and her trust fund. That's going to help us expand Whitmore Holdings faster than my father ever could." Jason whistled. "And here I thought you were in love." There was a pause. Then Caleb's voice, low and slurred with alcohol. "She's just a placeholder. Until someone better comes along, someone more compatible for the long haul." Laughter erupted again. But this time, Amelia's heart didn't break. It froze. 3 years of devotion, late-night calls, whispered, promises under starlit skies, his tearful proposal in Santorini, it all unraveled in a single breath. She didn't push the door open. She didn't scream. She simply turned and walked away, her heels clicking like war drums on the marble floor. By the time she arrived back at their penthouse, the velvet box was still clutched in her hand, unopened. Her fingers trembled not with heartbreak, but with a strange, unfamiliar resolve. Amelia sat at her desk and opened her laptop. She wasn't just Caleb's fiancé. She was also a silent partner in Whitmore Holdings. She had access to everything. It started with a few emails. Then, financial ledgers, offshore accounts, messages between Caleb and his associate, Rebecca Lane, a sleek executive who also sat on the company's board. The two of them had been planning a merger behind her back, one that would quietly drain Amelia's inherited assets and leave her with nothing but a pretty ring and a ruined name. By dawn, Amelia had compiled a digital dossier powerful enough to topple an empire. She stared at the screen. The glow, reflecting off the engagement ring that still rested on her finger. In less than 24 hours, she was supposed to stand before hundreds of guests and vow eternal love to a man who saw her as nothing more than a stepping stone. But Amelia wasn't the same woman who had walked into that hotel hours ago. The wedding would go on. The dress would be worn. The guests would be seated. Only the ending would change. And this time, it wouldn't be a fairy tale. It would be justice, dressed in white. The morning of the wedding arrived cloaked in eerie calm. Amelia stood at the mirror in her bridal suite, applying her makeup with the precision of a soldier painting on armor. No trembling hands, no fluttering heart. Just deliberate, icy control. The cream-colored envelope containing damning evidence of Caleb's betrayal remained hidden in a secret pocket sewn into the lining of her gown. She had planned everything down to the minute. Every detail of what was about to happen had been meticulously orchestrated. Her phone buzzed on the vanity. 11:45 a.m. Additional evidence secured. Reporter and photographer in position. The private investigator she had hired confirmed what she already suspected: more embezzlement. A secret vacation home in the Caymans under Rebecca Lane's name, and emails that mapped out post-honeymoon plans with chilling clarity. There was no turning back. Victoria, radiant, in a dusty rose gown, entered with a bouquet of white orchids and pale blush roses. "Darling, you look breathtaking." The flowers arrived just in time. "Just like you and Caleb, it's all destiny." Amelia forced a smile. If only she knew. Zoe, Caleb's sister and her supposed best friend, stood behind Amelia, adjusting her veil. "He's going to cry when he sees you." Amelia caught Zoe's eyes in the mirror. Let's hope so. As her bridesmaids toasted with champagne glasses clinking and voices full of anticipation, Amelia watched the clock tick toward noon. She didn't drink. She needed her mind sharp. Her phone buzzed again. 12:00 p.m. Business partners seated. Government contact on standby. Press outside. The music began. Pachelbel's canon drifted through the grand chapel as guests stood. Amelia stood behind the heavy oak doors, her bouquet gripped tightly, the envelope pressing firmly against her thigh like a secret weapon. The coordinator approached. "Ready, Miss Rhodes?" She nodded. "Let's begin." As she stepped into view, the crowd gasped softly in admiration. Caleb, waiting at the altar in his tailored tuxedo, wore a smile, rehearsed for headlines. His confidence glowed until Amelia's eyes locked with his. She didn't smile back. 3 steps from the altar, Amelia turned sharply to face the crowd. A hush fell over the church. "Before we begin," she said clearly, voice steady as steel, "I'd like to share some words. Not from scripture, but from Caleb Whitmore's private emails to Miss Rebecca Lane." Gasps erupted. Caleb stepped forward, whispering, "Amelia, what are you doing?" She opened the envelope, setting the record straight. With precision, she read aloud excerpts detailing their secret merger plans, their manipulation of her trust fund, and their intentions to discard her once her assets were secured. Right on cue, 2 government officials entered the church agents from the Financial Integrity Bureau. Caleb lunged, panic setting in, but Amelia was ready. She let the documents fall from her hands like snow, each page detailing lies, fraud, and betrayal. Phones rose. Cameras flashed. Caleb's world crumbled. Amelia didn't flinch. This wasn't a wedding anymore. It was a reckoning. The aftermath was a blur of gasps, flashing cameras, and chaos. Caleb was escorted out by the agents, his expression no longer smug, but hollow, staggered by the weight of public humiliation. Guests murmured, some horrified, others quietly impressed. Rebecca had slipped out the side exit, her designer heels clicking like gunshots against the marble. She wouldn't get far. Amelia had arranged for that too. As the church emptied, Victoria sat frozen in the front pew, her gloved hands trembling. Zoe stood at the edge of the altar, mascara streaking down her face. "Tell me, this isn't true," she whispered. But Amelia didn't answer. She wasn't interested in explanations anymore. She walked alone back down the aisle, each step echoing louder than wedding bells. The bridal suite was silent now. Her dress, once chosen to dazzle, now felt like a declaration of war that had finally served its purpose. She pulled the veil off, tossed it aside, and stood in front of the mirror. The woman staring back was someone she no longer recognized. Or rather, someone she had just begun to recognize. That evening, Amelia sat alone in her apartment, surrounded by discarded flowers, unopened gifts, and messages from strangers applauding her bravery. But bravery wasn't how she felt. What settled in her chest wasn't vengeance, it was clarity. She hadn't just exposed Caleb's betrayal. She had exposed herself to the parts of her that had ignored the red flags, made excuses, craved validation through someone else's spotlight. For years, she had molded herself to fit into the Whitmore legacy, convincing herself that love meant sacrifice. That power came through proximity. But now she saw the truth. Caleb hadn't changed her. He had revealed her. The strength was never in what he gave her. It was in what she had reclaimed. 3 days later, Victoria arrived unannounced. Amelia opened the door, unsure what to expect. A confrontation, denial. But Victoria held out a velvet box, the family pearls. "You've earned these more than anyone who's ever worn them," she said simply, her voice stripped of grandeur, eyes puffy from days of tears. "You didn't just save yourself, Amelia. You saved the rest of us from continuing a legacy built on silence." They sat together for an hour, drinking tea in fragile porcelain cups while surrounded by shattered illusions. "I thought I knew my son," Victoria whispered. "I defended him blindly, but you saw what I couldn't." Amelia didn't offer comfort. She offered truth. He had everything he needed to be a good man. He chose otherwise. And so did she. From that moment on, Amelia vowed never to let someone else's mask dictate her reality. She no longer needed validation from titles or bloodlines. She had already claimed something greater. Her voice, her story, her power. This wasn't just about Caleb anymore. This was about becoming the kind of woman who could walk away from a lie no matter how beautiful it looked on paper and write her own truth instead. Weeks passed, but the ripples of Amelia's stand at the altar echoed far beyond the church walls. Headlines erupted: Runaway Bride Topples Business Empire. Heiress exposes corporate fraud in live ceremony. Her face was everywhere. But she wasn't chasing fame. She was chasing purpose. From the quiet of her new apartment overlooking Hawthorne Square, Amelia began to rebuild. Gone were the high society luncheons and manicured obligations. In their place, research, conversations with lawyers, and meetings with advocacy groups. One day, she received an invitation from Eleanor Westfield, a well-known legal reformer and founder of a nonprofit dedicated to corporate transparency. Eleanor had watched the scandal unfold with interest and admiration. "You dismantled a multi-million-dollar operation with courage and precision," Eleanor said during their meeting over black coffee in a sunlit corner office. "What you did was bigger than personal revenge. It was a warning shot for an entire industry. Have you considered using that experience to help others?" Amelia blinked. No one had asked her that before. Everyone wanted her pain, her story, but not her potential. That conversation lit a fuse. Within weeks, she and Eleanor began planning what would become the Rhodes Initiative, a nonprofit focused on ethical business education and whistleblower protection. She partnered with forensic accountants, cybersecurity experts, and corporate lawyers who had once worked for the very companies she'd helped expose. She wasn't a victim. She was becoming a catalyst. Meanwhile, Zoe, devastated by her brother's actions, began working alongside Amelia. The betrayal had wounded her deeply, but like Amelia, she chose action over grief. "I don't want to fix the Whitmore name," Zoe had said. "I want to build something better, without the lies." Together, they created training programs for universities and businesses on ethical leadership. Amelia gave her first lecture at Rivergate Business School, and the impact was immediate. Students lined up afterward not for autographs, but for guidance. That's where she met Professor Nathan Reed, a guest lecturer in corporate ethics with a background in international law. Their first conversation was sharp, intellectually challenging, yet unexpectedly warm. He didn't tiptoe around her past, nor did he sensationalize it. He respected it, respected her. Over the next few months, they collaborated on an educational series titled Behind the Curtain Anatomy of Corporate Deception. What began as work soon evolved into long walks through Hawthorne Square, debates over Thai food, and quiet moments where the noise of the world faded. He never tried to fix her. He simply stood beside her. One afternoon, while reviewing scripts for a training module, Nathan looked at her and said, "You turned one of the ugliest nights of your life into a blueprint for transformation. That's not survival, Amelia. That's brilliance." She smiled. For the first time in months, the smile wasn't a mask. It was real. Because this wasn't just a new chapter. It was a new life. And this time, she was the author. Amelia Rhodes no longer looked over her shoulder. The woman who once trembled outside a hotel door now stood confidently at podiums, addressing rooms filled with executives, regulators, and scholars. The Rhodes Initiative had gained global momentum, partnering with government watchdogs and international universities. What started as a response to betrayal had evolved into a mission, one rooted in accountability, education, and courage? Her days were filled with purpose. Each morning, she walked through the glass doors of the initiative's headquarters, a repurposed art gallery in downtown Chicago, with a sense of quiet triumph. Where once walls had displayed oil portraits of industry tycoons, they now featured quotes from whistleblowers, activists, and reformers. On one wall, framed in minimalist brass, was her favorite. You don't need power to speak the truth. The truth gives you power. One afternoon, as she reviewed quarterly progress reports, Zoe entered her office, Dablet in Hand. Guess what? We just secured funding for the Rhodes Integrity Fellowship. 10 students a year. Fully funded. Amelia beamed. We're not just cleaning up the past anymore, she said. We're building the future. But growth wasn't just professional. It was personal. Her relationship with Nathan Reed had unfolded with a grace she never expected. There were no grand declarations or sweeping gestures, just consistency, honesty, and respect. He didn't pedestal her. He partnered with her. One evening, after hosting a roundtable on ethics in Silicon Valley, they walked hand in hand along the bay, wind gently tugging at her scarf. Nathan stopped, turning to her. You've become something unstoppable, Amelia, he said. Not because of what happened to you, but because of what you chose to do with it. She looked out at the waves, remembering the girl who once measured her worth by someone else's name. That version of herself seemed like a ghost, now still lingering, but no longer in control. I used to think strength meant keeping everything together, she said quietly. But it's knowing when to break, and still choose to rebuild. Later that night, back in their hotel suite, she opened a letter from Eleanor Westfield, her mentor, and one of the first people to believe in her. Inside was a simple sentence that made her eyes well with tears. Your story redefined what leadership means. Amelia had come full circle, not just in success, but in identity. She no longer sought closure through revenge or reputation. She had created a legacy not built on her past, but propelled by it. She still carried the envelope from her wedding day in a locked drawer, not out of anger, but as a reminder of the fork in the road. One path led to silence, comfort, and illusion. The other, her chosen path, led to truth, grit, and reinvention. She didn't just survive Caleb's betrayal, she transcended it. Because true growth doesn't erase the scars, it turns them into maps. 3 years to the day after the wedding that never happened, Amelia Rhodes stood before a full-length mirror. But this dress was different, sleek, minimal, free of the heavy embellishments once meant to impress. It reflected who she had become: bold, intentional, authentic. The venue was a botanical garden tucked along the edge of Lake Michigan. No cathedral, no crowd of business elites, just close friends, trusted mentors, and a future she had built herself. Outside, guests gathered beneath hanging lanterns and strings of wildflowers. Nathan Reed waited beneath an arch, woven with ivy and eucalyptus, his smile calm and real, not rehearsed, not calculated. Across the lawn, Zoe was wrangling flower petals with Amelia's goddaughter, Eleanor Westfield, now retired, but still sharp as ever, adjusted a foundation pin on her lapel. You ready? Zoe whispered, as she stepped into the bridal suite. Amelia nodded. More than ever. She walked down the aisle, not as someone rescued, but as someone risen. Every step forward wasn't just toward Nathan, it was toward the life she had fought for, one not built on illusion, but anchored in truth. Nathan's vows were simple. You taught me that love without honesty is performance, but with honesty, it becomes purpose. I don't just love you, Amelia. I believe in you. Her voice didn't shake when she responded. I thought the end of a wedding meant the end of my story, but I've learned it was just the first line of the one I was meant to write. The guests rose in a standing ovation, not for spectacle, but for the sheer authenticity of the moment. At the reception, instead of cake, they served lemon tartlets, Amelia's favorite since childhood. Nathan's students mingled with former whistleblowers, CEOs, and young professionals now working in compliance thanks to the Rhodes Initiative. Zoe clinked her glass for a toast. To Amelia, she said, raising her flute. The woman who turned a betrayal into a revolution, who reminded us that the truth might cost you comfort, but it pays back in freedom, tenfold. Later that night, under string lights and soft jazz, Amelia and Nathan shared their first dance. As they swayed, he whispered, "Do you ever think about how different life would be if you hadn't walked into that hotel suite?" She smiled, laying her head against his shoulder. "I do, and I'm grateful for every broken piece, because I didn't just survive it, I remade my entire life from it." The Maxwell pearls, once a weaponized heirloom, now rested in a museum exhibit funded by the foundation, symbolizing the power of reclaiming a narrative. A new inscription read, "From betrayal, truth. From truth, purpose." As the evening closed, Amelia stepped outside alone for a moment of quiet. The stars glittered above her, unburdened and free. Just like her. Some stories end with a wedding. Hers began with one and led to something far more rare. A life rooted in truth, purpose, and love that never asks you to compromise who you are. The truth has a way of finding its voice sometimes, through whispers, other times, through explosions. For Amelia Rhodes, it came through the crack in a hotel door. But it wasn't the betrayal that defined her. It was her response to it. Too often, we tie our self-worth to the roles we play in other people's lives. Fiancé, daughter-in-law, partner. But the moment Amelia realized her value was not dependent on anyone else's perception, she unlocked a strength she never knew she had. She learned that truth, though painful, is a form of love. Not the romantic kind, but a deeper, more liberating love, the kind we give ourselves. Walking away wasn't weakness. It was wisdom. Choosing justice over comfort, ethics over silence, and self-respect over illusion was her real triumph. Because the greatest revenge isn't just surviving betrayal, it's building something extraordinary because of it.